In emergency management, the definition of a stakeholder is any person or entity with a vested interest in the survival or recovery of a given community.
This is the Stakeholder Prepping podcast, where the tactical comes from the practical, and today, you become your own stakeholder.
Here are your hosts, Chris and AC.
Welcome back to Stakeholder Prepping, where you are the stakeholder in your own survival. And AC, I know we have asked our listeners to support our affiliates. We've asked our listeners to leave us a review or a 5-star rating somewhere. Today, I'm going to ask that they do one other thing, and that is take 30 seconds to tell a friend about us. If you have like-minded friends or family who want to be prepared, then just send them a text and tell them about this podcast that you enjoy. That would mean a ton to us. And like we said, we're never going to monetize this, and you'll never have to hear an advertisement that you have to skip through like you do on every other podcast, because believe it or not, AC, we hate those too, right?
We hate those too, yeah.
So just tell one other person about us, and then let them know why you listen to us, and we will be forever grateful. But AC, what are we talking about today?
Yeah, man, we're going to talk about winter because winter is coming. And this is kind of the winter preparation episode. And I think a lot of our listeners are probably already kind of dug in for winter. So for those people, we're sorry we're a little late on that, but I bet there could be a few things that you had forgotten, and maybe we will remind you of those things. For people in maybe the less harsh climates, they may still be in the preparing for winter mode. So we're going to go into what are all the things you need to do to prepare for winter.
I like it. So we are winterizing, and I think we should start with kind of that long range weather outlook. I loved the Game of Thrones winter is coming quip there.
Yeah.
But based on the official long range winter outlooks from NOAA and other forecasting sources, whether you'll have a hard winter really depends on where you live and what you define as hard. Is it cold or is it snow? The overall weather pattern for winter of 25-26 is going to be heavily influenced by developing weak La Nina weather pattern. And I've got kind of a summary of what official outlooks suggest for this winter. If you're kind of in the northern plains, upper Midwest, like Montana, North Dakota, Minnesota, we're looking at a colder, snowier winter, below average temperatures, sustained cold, wetter than average conditions are likely. It increases the potential for significant snowfall. And when you look at places like the Pacific Northwest and the Northern Rockies, again, we're below average temperatures, above average precipitation. So potentially a really good snowpack up in the mountains. And then if you're looking at Great Lakes Northeast, this one's kind of a wild card because there's an increased risk for cold snaps, but more active storm tracks. So many of our sources are suggesting like a stormy, active winter with an increased risk of nor'easters and those cold air intrusions from the Arctic, especially during the core months of December and January. When we look at like the southern tier, California, Southwest, Deep South, Southeast, it's supposed to be a warmer than average winter, drier than average for the precipitation. So we're looking at very, very interesting dynamics. But I think the key takeaway, at least in the US, is instead of a uniformly hard winter across the country, it looks to be kind of this winter of contrast. The northern states are more likely to experience that classic cold and snow that would qualify as a hard winter, but the South is more likely to see a continuation of dry, mild conditions. And this is all based on, weather forecasts that are far, far, far out, because forecasting is never an exact science, especially for a whole season. But these outlooks from NOAA and places like Farmer's Almanac these outlooks provide the best long-term planning guidance out there. And you can always look at Ventusky or Windy and downloading that app on your phone. Maybe pay for the app during winter so you have more visibility of weather that's going to show up at your door. But I kind of want to talk about the winter risk matrix. And we harp on this all the time, but what does your risk matrix look like? Are you more likely to get stuck on the way to work or coming home? Are you more likely to get snowed in? Are your friends and neighbors more likely to need a little extra help? Is that food? Is that warmth? Is that company? So there's a lot of things that you can kind of mentally do to prepare for winter and winterize yourself as well as your home.
Yeah, I guess the risk matrix really does shift a lot more than I give it credit for because having a seasonal risk matrix does make sense. You're probably more likely to get snowed in the winter than you are in the summer. So I guess it does kind of make sense that your risk matrix has to be a little updated by the season, right?
I definitely think so. I think it's something that your your shorts and sandals for vacation are probably not going to come out terribly often during the winter unless you're actually traveling, but they're critical to surviving hot temperatures during the summer. So you kind of have to prep your go bag, your get home bag, all of it to match your seasonal risk matrix.
Yeah, that's true. And when we all put on a couple of pounds in the winter, you're less likely to fit into your bathing suit. So you've got that beach bod on the risk matrix as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is important things to think about. Something else that's seasonal and important is servicing the heating systems in your home. Like if you're somebody who has a furnace or a boiler or a heat pump, this is the time to kind of service those things and especially check the filters. This is a big one. The general guidelines for changing most HVAC filters, they say, and that's that little like 1 to 4 inch pleated little paper thing. If you don't know, they generally say every 90 days, so every 3 months. But eh, no one's going to do that. None of us do. The best time to change your filter is heavily dependent on how often your system is actually running and the conditions in your home. So making it kind of the seasonal change is actually a great way to ensure that maintenance is performed before peak usage, if that makes sense. So as we go into the summer, you're more likely to be running your air conditioner. And so that's probably a good time to change that filter. And then again, right now, as we're going into winter and you're going to be running that heat pump or that furnace, now is a time to change out those filters because you're going to be using them more. And think about if you're drawing air through that little pleated filter more, you're just going to have more gunk and garbage and all kinds of stuff build up on that, especially if you're like us and you've got dogs in the house. Remember, dogs' coats are also seasonal. So seasonal changes on these filters is huge.
Oh, yes, their coats are seasonal. The Husky and the Guardian breed have puff jackets right now.
Right. Oh, yeah, 100%. I just had to give my dog a bath yesterday, and he's a red heeler, and he's got this big puffy coat on, kind of like a cardigan right now. And then when we go into summer, same thing. It's just that entire coat blows off and just destroys every filter in the house. So this is really important to think about that. Um, there's a lot of other seasonal aspects you might not be thinking of. Pollen is another thing that's going to get drawn into your house, and in certain seasons, it's going to be way worse. So, just thinking about a seasonal change on all of those filters in your home, this is a big one. Also, chimneys and fireplaces, if that's how you heat your home for the winter, man, getting your chimney or your flue inspected and cleaned or cleaning it yourself, this prevents the fires, the backups, the carbon monoxide issues, and a lot of this has to do with like the length of your chimney or flue as well. Like I have a very short chimney. My chimney is in the lower level of the house, and it's maybe only 10 feet of chimney. And so when I clean it, I honestly cleaned it for the first time after 5 or 6 years, and there was almost nothing in there. And I ended up burning a lot of sappy wood too, so I was expecting it to have an issue. But the shorter the chimney flue, the hotter the gases are going up. And so they just aren't as likely to stick to the sides. It's that cooling that actually makes all that garbage stick to the sides. So I'm in a good space. But if you have a 2 or 3 story chimney, then yeah, you may have to clean that a lot more often than somebody like me.
And they make things called creosote busters.
Hmm.
It's kind of like a fire log that you burn, but it scrubs your. It uses its own smoke to scrub the smoke residue from your flue and chimney. They recommend using those every 100 fires or so, but depending on the use of your fireplace as well as your chimney and flue length, you might want to take a look at just burning one of those in a wood burning fireplace before the season starts. If you've got gas or an electric fireplace, obviously you don't need to do that. But if you are using a wood burning stove, wood burning fireplace, anything like that for heat, or as your emergency backup, just make sure it's serviceable and ready to go. My wife and I actually just recently had an experience with the fireplace, and it was not a pleasant one. So stay safe
No.
there. Yeah. Well, so when we light a fire, normal habit is check the flue, make sure it's open because we keep it closed to keep heat inside when we're not using the fireplace. So check the flue, make sure it's open, and then build the fire. Then we use a paper towel and just roll up a single paper towel, light it, and use that as kind of our extended match. But while we're doing that, we also train the heat of the fire by holding that burning end just below the flue. So the hot air rises and starts to start that draw so we don't get as much smoke in the house as the fire is lighting and building its own heat. And then light the fire and toss in the rest of the paper towel. Well, the flue was not completely open. It was enough that I wasn't seeing any of that smoke from the paper towel coming back down. So that was making it through. But when we lit the actual fire, was not nearly open enough in order for that full amount of smoke to escape. So we almost set off the fire alarms. We had to use a fire extinguisher to get it to go out. Had to scrub soot out of the grout on the tile. Like it was a mess and had to open up the windows, use tower fans and smoke ejectors and just get everything out, get it all cleared and then scrub the walls because all of that soot never made it into the flue to get stuck for the creosote buster log. So, yeah, it even if you know what you're doing, one small detail can kind of throw a wrench in.
And I'm going to guess this was probably your first fire of the season.
It was not. It was like the third.
Weird. So it just got stuck for some other reason, huh?
I think when I opened the flue, it didn't actually hit its catch point.
Oh,
So
okay.
it was just kind of sticking there. And then
Hmm.
as I was getting everything loaded back up, it must have fallen back closed. So yeah,
Yeah.
it was my bad.
I can imagine. And this is the reason that those kind of December, January, February is when the most amount of house fires happen, which is kind of crazy because I just assumed it was like 4th of July made up for every other house fire out there. But apparently it doesn't. Like there's actually just a ton of house fires in those 3 cold winter months. And it's not July when every idiot with fireworks stash is trying to burn down their neighborhood. So that was new to me.
Believe it or not, Thanksgiving, because a lot of people try to deep fry their turkeys and
Oh, yep.
don't let them thaw completely, and that oil will explode and then light on fire. And yeah, it's a giant danger to your garage. So
Yeah, they're doing it on the
know what you're doing.
garage or the deck, right? People are just doing it too close to the house. Yeah, you're right. I've seen a lot of those videos that around Thanksgiving is very common for people to try to burn their house down with the fire. But speaking of that, if you are gonna burn your house down around the holiday season, it's probably a good idea to make sure your insurance is all updated. And because I think fire, unless you set it on purpose, fire's like always covered, right?
Right. So It's one of those things that it's a standard coverage on a policy is fire. Arson is not necessarily covered, especially if you are doing it. So you need to check your contract for specifically arson coverage. But fire is almost always covered. So now would be a good time to make sure that your coverage A, which is the dwelling coverage B, which is the stuff in the backyard, that's the detached structures, and then your C, all of your crap. Uh, that's your clothes, shoes, bed, mattress, TV, everything that you own that's not nailed, glued, or screwed down. Make sure that your coverage A, B, and C limits are appropriate and that you understand what your loss of use or additional living expense limit is in case you did have a fire. And this is one of those things where uh, I almost guarantee our listeners are going to hear this and then look at it and then forget it. Or they're just going to say, oh, that's a good idea. I should check. And then they're not going to look at their policy. You need to actually look at your policy and understand what's going on
It's a
before you try to make a
contract.
claim.
You have to read it, have to read the contract, have to understand. But yeah, that additional living expense you're talking about, if something happens, like your house burns down, your insurance company will give you some amount of money to go live somewhere else for a while. And this is just isn't just for the homeowners. If you're a renter, you have some amount of additional living expense there as well in your renter policy. But I think those expenses are based on kind of a percentage of how much crap you own. And if you're in a smaller area like an apartment, you have less crap, your insurance company gives you less money. And so you might have what, just a couple of $1,000s of
Right. Yeah.
ALE.
So if you have, let's say that you have 10,000 in coverage for your stuff and you've got a 10% limit for your additional living expenses, also called loss of use or ALE, that means you've only got $1,000 to cover a hotel. That's piddly.
That's yeah, you're gonna be homeless very quickly. So I guess it's yeah, it's very important to check your policy, regardless of whether there's a renter's policy or you own your home, checking that ALE right now, because if you did have a fire in winter and needed to not live in your house for a while, and I'm not even talking about like a total loss, but man, if you just burnt your kitchen down, maybe you can't live there. So you're going to need to know how much money you have available in that policy to let you live somewhere else. And yeah, man, if they're just going to write you $1,000 check and say check into a hotel, that's not going to last you very long.
No, it's really not. And in some places around the country, some municipalities, your landlord has a duty to give you somewhere to stay or help you out. But most of the country is not like that. They have no responsibility or additional coverage or anything like that. So it's really important to make sure that your insurance policy is up to date and you understand how it works.
Yeah. So let's talk about uh, how can we keep ourselves from burning the house down and keeping the house from freezing up and having water losses and all the other things that happen during winter.
Well, I think one of the first things to do is test your smoke and carbon monoxide detectors. I mean, replace the batteries before they start chirping, replace the units entirely if they're over 10 years old. They're not that expensive. But carbon monoxide is a major risk factor when heating systems are running and windows are closed. If the natural gas that you're using, one of the byproducts is carbon monoxide. So if it doesn't burn completely and cleanly, you
Right.
could be poisoning yourself.
Man, I'll tell you, my carbon monoxide detector, it just beeps all the time and it gives me a headache. So I just took the battery out.
That's probably the carbon monoxide giving you a headache. Um, but you do bring up a good point about, if you have headaches at home and your carbon monoxide detector is chirping, you should probably pay attention to that.
That might be it. Yep.
Um, and then also having some sort of backup heat. Verify that any backup heating sources, space heaters, wood stove are working, that you have enough fuel, whether it's kerosene or wood or batteries, jump packs or solar generator, whatever you've got, make sure that you've got it up and running so you know what you're doing.
Right. Good call. And then we've got obviously the outdoor stuff, right? These are really simple things, but like the hose bib covers, man, this is a $1 piece of styrofoam that can keep all of your pipes from freezing, it's just so important. Things like protecting your pipes, making sure that, you insulate exposed water pipes, especially those in like unheated areas like crawl spaces or attics, things that are against exterior walls. I just had one. There's an exposed pipe that goes to my well. I think it actually probably comes from the well, and I insulate it. I basically did a little wrap job and filled it with spray foam. I've never had an issue. And just checking the other day, over the summer, some critters had decided to take all of that insulation and go, make a nice two-bedroom condo with it somewhere else. So
Oh,
I
that's
had
fun.
all this exposed, uh, you know, pipe coming out of the ground that obviously was going to freeze during the winter. So it was just a good time to do the walk around of the property and find those things that I thought I had already insulated. And yeah, nature had another plan for that stuff.
I wonder if you can go and repo any of that from them. Like,
Every once in a while, like especially in my barbecue, I do have to evict a very nice family of mice that's never given me any problems. But yeah, I gotta tell them to hit the skid sometimes. One thing I have heard when you're doing insulation like that may be critter prone. Spray foam obviously is like a godsend for some reason, but using spray foam in combination with steel wool. So like fill a hole with steel wool and then use spray foam to kind of keep it in there. That adds a little R value to the insulation. But as soon as little critters start biting into steel wool, they do not like it. I don't know if like the mice and rats in my area have a lot of like silver fillings or something, but they do not like biting on that stuff at all.
makes sense. That's a really good cheap hack too.
Super cheap hack. You'll just fill, if you've got a hole that critters keep coming in and out of, fill it with a little steel wool and then hit it with the spray foam. That spray foam provides the insulation and the R value, but as soon as they bite into that and start hitting steel wool, they'll go find something else.
I like it. So you just, I know you were kind of talking to me offline, but you just updated your sprinkler and irrigation system for winter, right?
Yeah, and that includes like blowing out of the system, and I will talk about that a little bit later because I actually went and found a really good chart with, depending on the material that your irrigation is made out of, it really impacts how many psi you can put through that when you're blowing out. And I found a very cool little thing on Amazon that basically has a 3/4 inch hose adapter on one side, which is your normal garden hose, and then it has a like a chuck for your air compressor on the other side. And so you can even use this to like drain your home system if you're going to be gone for some amount of time, things like that. So yeah, I will talk about that a little bit later.
Very cool. And one of the other big things is, as far as water goes, know where your shutoff is. If you do have a broken pipe or a leaking pipe because of freezing, you need to locate that main water shutoff valve and ensure that everyone in the household knows how to turn the water off in case a pipe bursts. But don't let yourself freeze to death because you got a broken pipe and got wet and then the power went out. You need to know where that shutoff is. So there's a lot that you can do to work on your own house. You can seal leaks and drafts, check around windows, doors, where pipes enter the house for any sort of air leaks. That weather stripping, caulk, plastic window kits to seal drafts. Obviously, you can use steel wool and spray foam. That's a new one for me and super cool. Um, Clean all of the leaves and debris from your gutters and downspouts so that you have proper drainage because clogged gutters can actually lead to ice dams, which damage the roof. They cause interior leaks. And if you've ever seen a fully formed ice block in a gutter and that gutter breaks, it will punch through a window just like in Christmas Vacation. Um, yeah, that's a wake up call. I remember that happening when I was a little kid.
Fell off and went through the window or just fell onto the ground?
Um, it was a tree that took down the gutter that then the ice in the gutter ended up in the dining room.
But yeah, I can imagine. I mean, water, whatever, 6 pounds a gallon. So you figure you get enough ice filling up a 4 inch gutter. It's going to be heavy.
Yeah, especially when you get all those leaves and dirt and sediment and all that in there, it's probably closer to 12 pounds a
So
gallon.
trimming the trees back too, then, right? Making sure that the trees are trimmed properly in winter is huge.
Yes. Trim back any dead or overhanging tree branches that could fall in your house or your car or power lines or anything under the weight of snow or ice. That's a big one. And then what else can we do, AC?
Well, I would like to move on to the vehicle preparation side of it because getting your car ready for winter is just vital. There's all kinds of things that are winter specific when it comes to cars. Tires are a big one, right? Making sure that you've got the proper depth in your tread and proper tire pressure. And if you're somebody that switches to winter tires, now is the time to do that. In a lot of the country, I think they outlaw like studs on the tires. Where I am, we can have studs, which is really cool. I mean, it's like these little spiky things on your tires running around, but they let us do that. It's terrible for the roads, but but it's actually it's good on the cars, man. But yeah, if you live in that snowy or icy area, switching to your set of winter tires, making sure that you know that your tire chains actually fit your car if you have them, and then knowing how to put those on. I think that's one thing is people go buy the bag of tire chains and then they never ever put them on in their life. And then you're trying to put them on for the first time in a foot of snow. So practice your preps. Know how those tire chains go on is a huge one. Uh, and then like checking the tire pressure because seasonally the tire pressure in your tire, the air pressure changes. So if you run nitrogen in your tires, then your tire pressure is a lot less likely to change in colder weather. And you'll know that if you've got those cute little green caps on your valve stems, then you probably paid the extra $10 for nitrogen when you went to Costco.
We actually run nitrogen in both of our vehicles in the tires just because you actually get a lot better balance and less road wear and better mileage with
Fuel economy.
nitrogen.
Yeah, everything translates to fuel economy. When the tires are happy, then yeah, there's a lot more fuel economy. So uh fluids, big one, right? Check top off your antifreeze, your coolant, that little the de-icer blend for the little monkey jizzers there that clean your windshield off because you can use that to melt a little ice. So there's there's a different, winter blend you can put in there. In the windshield washer fluid, there's that winter grade stuff. Wipers. If your wipers are old, they're going to get way worse in winter because they're going to get cold and they're going to crack. And then just like the filter in your heating system, the oil change in winter is a good one. It's a good time to do the oil change. You generally want to use thinner engine oil or what they call lower viscosity to protect your engine during startup. And a lot of people probably don't care because they just go to the factory and just get the oil change and they just like don't care what oil they're putting in their car. But I think it's like just important to understand. I think most people listening either already understand and they're like, just shut up and don't tell me, or they're like, yeah, I don't care what the W on the bottle means because I just go to the magic oil change place and they do it. But engine oil thickens when it gets cold.
Yeah,
So
I need
when
some
you
help understanding this one. I don't
it it
understand
is it
oil
is kind of
weights.
interesting. Oil weights are kind of weird, but yeah, when you start your car in freezing temperatures, the oil needs to flow very, very quickly to the very important parts of the motor. And the oil is in the bottom and the important parts are in the top. And so having super thick oil in the winter makes it a little harder for that oil to get up there. So thinner engine oil has that lower number on the bottle. So the number on the bottle of motor oil represents its viscosity or its resistance to flow. So a lower number indicates less viscous or thinner oil, while the higher number means it's more viscous or thicker. And lower temperature viscosity is that first number on the bottle before the W, and W stands for winter. So that number indicates how well the oil will flow in cold temperatures. So a number lower means the oil is thinner and will flow more easily when starting your engine on a cold day. For example, the 5W whatever oil is thinner at startup than the 10W whatever oil. Does that make sense?
Yes. So
Yeah.
that part makes sense, but what is like 10W30, 10W?
Right.
Yeah.
So the high number or the high temperature viscosity is that second number. So this number indicates the oil's viscosity at the engine's what they call normal operating temperature. For example, the 5W30 oil will behave like a 30 weight oil when the engine is hot, while the 5W20 oil will behave like 20 weight oil at that same temperature. Does that make sense?
Okay, so if I've got 5W30, that means when it's a cold start during the winter, it behaves super, super liquid, and then it kind of thickens up as it gets warm. Am I understanding that right?
Sure, let's say that. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah. So then obviously, basically here's the thing. Thinner oil flows faster, ensuring it reaches critical engine components quickly. So in the winter, running a thinner winter weight oil is better for the engine. Now, a lot of people are just going to do whatever your manufacturer recommends, and that's what you should do. If you have one of those fancy new cars, then you don't need to know any of this stuff. But I just think it's valuable information to know because I don't know, I just like knowing useless things, I guess. But it's just it's important to know what the little things on the bottle mean. And think about it like this: thicker oil creates more resistance or drag on the engine's internal components. So, like the starter motor, it might be harder to crank the engine in winter, especially when you combine that with like the cold weak battery. A thinner oil will actually allow the engine to start easier.
Nice.
So
Okay.
all
That
this
makes
stuff,
sense.
it all kind of goes together in the car, right? This is all very important. But yeah, so having the battery tested is a big one because the battery in the summer may start fine. And remember, we talk about this all the time, battery technology, but it's just a chemical reaction. So the warmer it is, that battery is just going to operate a little better. And as it gets colder, then you're going to know that your battery is getting weaker. So having it tested as you go into winter for the car, big one. Keeping your gas tank at least half full. This is like a prepper mantra, right? This is the where do I start prepping? Make sure your gas tank's full. But in winter, it's even more important because a full gas tank will actually keep fuel lines from freezing. And this is actually really interesting that this is how that works. But basically, a full tank keeps your fuel lines from freezing by minimizing the formation of water condensation inside the gas tank. If it's full of gas, there's no air in there to condense and create ice that will turn into water, and that's going to be bad for your engine. So if you keep your gas tank full in winter, then you're just less likely to have condensation form in the tank that's going to cause a problem for the engine, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that and as soon as it condenses, I mean, that's water droplets. Water is heavier than gasoline, so it's going to sink all the way to the bottom and go into your fuel lines, isn't it?
That's right. The water is the first thing that your engine is going to try to burn. So that is bad. And then obviously it reduces airspace. So by keeping your tank at least half full, and full is ideal, you reduce the amount of that empty airspace, which significantly limits the area where condensation can actually form. Now, if you drive a diesel, it's all kind of different. You may need a degeller in the fuel when it gets into winter and an engine block heater. A lot of people with diesels, because they just start so much harder, they want to have a plug-in engine block heater. So that's a that's a big one. And then I would say having the emergency car kit, like maybe a bag of sand or some of that non-clumping kitty litter, uh, road salt for tire traction, having the tools. I have this very cool, just it's just a very lightweight collapsible snow shovel that I bought on Amazon for like $10, and it has saved me so many times because you just get a little high centered there and you're not going anywhere. So having the shovel, ice scraper or brush, having jumper cables, having a tow rope or tow chain. Chris, I know you keep one of these in your car and it has definitely saved some coworkers and made you look really cool before.
It
So
has the jumper cables and the tow ropes.
it's a good thing to have, not just for you, but for them. And then road flares or the reflective triangle or those fluorescent distress flags or those new little really they look like a little hockey puck and they're like little strobes that people are using instead of flares these days. I'm a purist. I like the flare. I like to start fires. It's good for other things. I've got one in my get home bag, but there's all kinds of other distress reflective stuff you can have uh, for the car, because another thing about winter is it happens to get darker earlier. And then there's some important kind of personal items. There's the blanket, having some extra warm clothing, having water, non perishable snacks, a couple of hand warmers go a long way. And then an MRE with a heater can be just a huge morale boost if you're stuck in the snow. And I'm sure you can relate to that.
Oh, yes. MRE with the heater and a rock or
A
something
rock or something.
is going to save your mentality for staying overnight on the side of the road for sure.
Right. 100%. And then lastly, if you're somebody that has like a camper or an RV, um, you probably want to make sure that you've drained all your lines properly, you've winterized this, and also make sure that the propane heater in your RV works, because this can make a really good lifeboat if you need to leave your home for a while. If the power goes out and you can't heat your home, or you've got broken pipes or something, you can move into the RV. So making sure that that's kind of ready to go if you do need to move into the RV for winter is a big one. And one other thing about RVs, especially I know this from personal experience from switching over to like lithium iron phosphate batteries in the RV. A lot of people are moving to lithium because they just have a lot more power. But lithium batteries are very unhappy below freezing. So if you have an RV and you're going to use fancy batteries in it, you can damage those batteries because that RV is definitely going to get below freezing. You're not turning the heat on. So think about that. Either having a plug in heater or running the propane heater in the RV for some amount of time on those really, really cold days. That can extend the life of those fancy batteries if you're somebody that's running lithium in the RV now.
Gotcha. Okay. I didn't realize that the batteries would make that big of a difference, but it
It's
absolutely makes sense.
huge. Like a lead acid battery, man, they get weaker, but they will always work. And it's not bad to freeze those things. They get weaker, but when they warm back up, that reaction starts happening. Lithium's different. If you try to throw a charge on lithium in extreme cold temperatures, or you try to pull energy off of a lithium battery in extremely cold temperatures, it will permanently damage the battery. It's really bad for lithium batteries. So a lot of these new lithium batteries have like little built-in heaters, and they've got a little like Bluetooth thing. You can Bluetooth to your phone and see what's going on with them. But yeah, I switched out to lithium batteries in my camper, and now I need to be really cognizant of that during the winter, that I either need to insulate them, or on the really cold days, what I usually do is I go out and I turn the propane heater on in the camper for a little bit. And then I've got one of those very inexpensive little digital thermometers just on the side of the battery, because even when it's, you know, 10 degrees outside, it's not going to be 10 degrees inside the RV. The insulation is going to provide something for you. So being able to just open up that little hatch and check, hey, are the batteries getting close to freezing? Uh, then I can take some other measures. But yeah, if you're trying to use the lithium batteries and pull a bunch of energy out of them or put energy into them at extremely low temperatures, you can permanently damage those batteries. And that's unlike traditional battery technology that we're used to, like lead acid batteries.
That's a really good point for anyone who has an RV or a camper. That's that's huge.
So what else? Tell us about what tell us about emergency supplies. What are we going to stockpile differently during the winter?
Yeah, so a heavy snow event usually lasts 1 to 2 days in a single location most of the time. The total disruption, cleanup, recovery from blowing snow and drifting, that can last a whole lot longer. But you have to prepare for power outages and being stuck at home. The basics are water, at least a gallon per person per day. Food, you want the non perishable, high calorie stuff, the canned goods, energy bars, dried fruit. Of course, you want your P38 manual can opener. You don't want to be stuck trying to wedge that thing underneath the electric one when there's no power. Lighting, flashlights, battery powered lanterns, plenty of extra batteries. This is also, I kind of want to talk about this one. You can, if you are a private homeowner, there is nothing that says that you are not allowed to install emergency lights. Just the same ones that you see at the hospital or, an office building, that when the power shuts off, it kicks on. You can do that in your own home, and you can even dress it up to make it look fancy and match your decor. But you can also use chicken incubation lights in those. And if you screw those into the light bulbs, then you are getting a little bit of heat from your emergency lighting as it goes out. So, the power goes out, your emergency lights kick on, and your emergency heater automatically kicks on. You just have to be kind of careful about making sure that it's insulated and you're not overcharging or melting that light bar. You also want to look at communication. So, a battery powered or hand cranked NOAA radio for weather reports, fully charged power bank for cell phones. Make sure that you have the ability to communicate with friends, family, and whoever needs to know that you're still alive. Medical, have that first aid kit and at least a week's supply of necessary prescription meds. This one can be a challenge if you haven't made it to the pharmacy in a very long time, but if the weather's coming in, make sure that you've got your critical meds. And then warmth. You want to make sure that you've got extra blankets, sleeping bags, coats, hats, gloves. We're going to post a video, and this is a kind of a TikTok video that I came across, or Facebook Reel, or whatever you want to call it. But you can have a candle pipe on standby. And the way this works is it's just a steel drainage pipe or gutter pipe downspout that has one end pointing down, and then there's a horizontal section, and then one end points up. And depending on how many candles you want to fit to it, 6 to 8 will give you plenty of heat. It's the same concept as when we were doing, or when we talked about the Jesus candle and the clay pots. Do you remember that, AC?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what you're saying is it doesn't create any more heat, but it just helps centralize that heat where you want it. Rather than having the heat just go straight up to the ceiling, it will concentrate it on that little black pipe, and actually, I think it will convect a little bit of airflow.
Right. And so the hotter that pipe is, the more candles you have, the more airflow you're going to get, and the hotter that airflow is going to be. Just as it's going through that pipe, the air warms up and it does create its own little flow. Um, so yeah, we'll post a video of that on our website with this blog.
Yeah,
But
I have a similar concept, like with my, wood stove. I've got these little fans, and I think they have a little capacitor, so it's kinda like the BioLite stove that as they heat up, these little fans turn on, using, I think it's just a little capacitor that, because it's hot on one side and cold on the other side, it creates current and it turns a little fan. But what it does is it pulls the air over the wood stove, rather than having all the wood just go straight up the chimney and outside, or all the heat go straight up the chimney and outside. It has uh creates that convection, and some of that warm air actually blows into the room, and it makes a huge difference, these little things. So you're not creating any more energy, you're just directing which way that energy goes, and you're making it warmer where you are.
yeah, and I mean, those are great. Those little fans, those are almost little heat powered generators. And speaking of generators, I mean, same rules as your car. The oil change with lower viscosity oil, make sure your battery's charged and refreshed or desulfated. If it's an electric start, you might need to do some extra work, and maybe try to use the pull start, just in case your electric start isn't working or you want to double check. It's always good to have a second way to start your generator. If you've got a gas generator, running zero ethanol fuel will actually make it run for way longer. So avgas or super clear or race fuel. Race fuel might have some methanol alcohol in it. So that's just going to burn really hot for really short time. So just be very clear on what you're getting. If you do have a dual fuel or propane generator, you can buy a plug-in propane heater wrap that'll get you a lot more fuel out of the bottle, because it it avoids the condensation as the temperature changes. So you don't get that frost on the bottle, and you actually get more usable fuel out of it. But really, you need to have a pace model set up for your heating. So primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency is that your heat pump, furnace, wood stove, fireplace, candle pipe, candle pots, What is your primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency? Those are all important things to think about before winter really sets in.
Yeah, that's a good one. Just making sure that you have some way to heat your home if the power goes out or if the flue in the wood stove gets blocked or whatever it is. Having that base model, having multiple ways to heat the house, maybe having the backup little stamped out wood stove on standby, things like that. It's funny. I was talking recently to some friends that live in Florida, and Florida's beautiful. Don't get me wrong, man. Like I like to vacation in Florida, um, but we were talking about just why I wouldn't wanna live there, and my big reason was that where I live, if it gets cold in the winter, I can start a fire and I can survive, but where they live, when it gets extremely hot in the summer, I just couldn't live somewhere where I'd die when the air conditioning went out. Like, that
Yeah.
would I just couldn't do it. Like, if the air conditioning goes out and then people just die, that's kinda my issue, I think, with a lot of the very hot areas, the Arizonas and stuff. That's my big one is that I know how to keep myself alive with primitive skills where I live, and I think if you go somewhere where it's really, really hot in the summer, you can't just rub 2 sticks together and make an air conditioner, you know?
That's
So,
very true.
yeah, let's talk a little bit about, like, the yard and garden prep. This is a big one. You just putting your outdoor areas to bed for the winter, right? So the lawn, rake and remove all the fallen leaves, prevent that fungal growth, mow the lawn that one last time to the correct height, maybe somewhere around 2 inches. Your garden beds, add that thick layer of mulch or compost to the perennial beds and around the shrubs for insulation. If you're going to do any winter cold frame gardening, like the little mini greenhouses, make sure you have your greenhouse and cold frames in proper working order and also have necessary equipment to repair them if you need an expedient repair in the middle of winter, like repair tape or those little backup acrylic panels. I had I think it was just the snow load broke a couple little acrylic panels on my greenhouse last year, and luckily I had it's like this greenhouse repair tape. It's like a thick film. It feels like like a heavy mill plastic tarp, but it's sticky almost, and you can create little repair patches. But I've got citrus in my greenhouse, and it would have absolutely all died had I not been able to just repair it in the middle of winter. So I'll
Wow.
yeah, I'll post some links to some Amazon products you can buy to just have on hot standby. Very inexpensive, but obviously it could save your whole greenhouse if you're in a weather event and something breaks. If you have animals outdoors, this is a good time to make sure they have adequate thresh or shavings to bed down on. Um, there are some really good plug-in de-icers, these de-icer rings for your livestock water sources and ponds. If you run a heat lamp in your chicken coop or duck house, this is very common. This is the way most people like to burn down their houses that are homesteaders. So, just have a plan for that. Check it, make sure you can't bump it, make sure it can't fall. This is just a very common fire to have that heat lamp in your chicken coop fall down on all those nice cedar shavings. So if you have bees, there's a couple different ways to insulate them. Bee blankets. I use like a rigid foam insulation and then wrap the little beehive and just tape it down for the winter, and that's always worked for me. And then be ready to deploy that backup wood stove in the greenhouse if needed. Remember in Homestead when they were baking bread in the greenhouses?
Yep.
I
Yep.
thought that
That
was
was a
just
brilliant idea.
genius idea, but yeah, keeping the greenhouse warm in the winter and then using that heat for other things, I think that's just prepper on steroids right there. I just thought that was really cool. Um, and then, the perennials and shrubs. You want to prune back the dead, damaged branches um, on anything that's going dormant for the winter. Uh, Clean, drain, and store all of your power equipment, right? This is the time to winterize and put away the mowers and weed whackers and that kind of stuff. So you aren't just, you know, pulling on that cord in the summer and the spring and cussing the whole time when it won't start. So taking those proper steps to winterize now, putting away the furniture, obviously, all that kind of stuff. Um, And then blowing out the lines is something we talked about earlier, especially for irrigation or sprinkler systems. Uh, but the most crucial factor is controlling the air pressure. And this is really cool. So I bought off Amazon. I'll post a link. Very inexpensive. It basically goes into the air compressor chuck on one side, and then it's got the garden hose, the 3/4 inch garden hose on the other side. And you can adjust how much pressure goes through those lines at your little air compressor. And so I went out to the garden and it's like, okay, PVC, like rigid pipe, you really want to have that around 40 psi. You really don't want to go above 60. PVC can handle slightly higher pressure, but high PSI can still crack the valves and the fittings, things like that. When you go into the polyethylene lines, and that's like that black line, that's lower. Like you want somewhere 30, you really don't want to go above 50 psi for those. And I'll post a little chart that I found. And this type, that polyethylene, this type of pipe, it's more flexible and generally can't withstand those high pressures that PVC could. And then drip lines, it's like less than 30 because those drip lines, they can just blow out. So drip components, the micro sprayers, those little seals, they're very delicate when it comes to pressure. So being able to adjust that on your air compressor is just huge because you want to be able to blow everything out, but you don't want to just blow out seals and rings and gaskets and components and any of that other stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I knew the drip lines were gonna have a lower, PSI, but I didn't realize it was that much lower.
It's a
30
lot lower.
PSI will blow it out completely.
Yeah, and it's not the line, it's actually all the other stuff. It's like the seals and the micro sprayers and all the other parts that you put on those, they will blow off the line, or the little T's are, um, those can, be liable to, like, break off and split and those kind of stuff. So it's actually not the line so much as all the other stuff you have plugged into it. Like the little tiny micro sprayer heads just aren't meant to put up with that kind of really high, PSI. So yeah, I've got a few different things in my garden between like the irrigation system and uh, the sprinkler system and things like that. So it's nice to know what each of those materials is made out of so you know what kind of PSI you can put through those. And then obviously having a way to do that in your home too. If you are going to go on vacation in the winter, uh, having a way to drain the lines in your home is huge. If you plan to kind of winterize the house, knowing where to turn off your well if you have one, knowing where to turn off the street water if you're getting water from the street, and then being able to drain those lines out. That way, if it does get too cold in the house while you're gone, if the power goes out while you're gone and you can't maintain maybe that 55 degrees in the house, if it does get too cold, nothing's going to break. And the big one that people often forget about is if you're going to drain all that stuff and you have an electric hot water heater, is turning that off. You can do irreparable damage to the hot water heater if it's empty. So if you're going to drain that out, or if you get a broken line or something like that, having the ability to turn off the hot water heater. So that's something I do if I travel during the winter and no one's going to be home. Empty all the lines, and then you basically depressurize the lines in the house, but then also throwing the breaker on that hot water heater so it's not on when there's no water in the tank. That can be really bad for the hot water heater.
Yeah, and that's also a a really, really good way to not come back to a house at all, because
Right.
they can start fires if they
Right.
have no water in them. So,
So, yeah, coming back
definitely
to no
something to
house, bad.
yeah.
Coming back to a house full of water, bad. So think about those kinds of things. Yeah, I think just having the overall basic, winter kit and knowing where everything is. I think your winter prep kit for the family is going to be a little different because you really are going to be focused on not just the heat, but also the way to keep the house structurally sound. I think something we didn't talk about is having a way to get the really heavy snow load off the house. I've seen people do the fill the sock full of salt trick and throw it up on the
Yep.
house. Have you done that?
Um, I've also seen people that they'll go to Lowe's or Home Depot and get a carpet scrap and lay their new carpet scrap over the stairs of their porch. So when it snows overnight, they just walk down, pull the carpet, and all of the stairs are clean.
Well, yeah,
Yep.
that's a genius idea. And I know we talked about like bringing in the just the outdoor yard furniture stuff too, right? Like putting that in the garage or putting it under cover. But I always really like that whenever there's a snow event, and maybe this is regionally specific for me, but whenever there's a snow event, people take photos of their lawn furniture full of snow for the local news channel.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that you should leave your lawn furniture outside so I can get a good idea of what the snow buildup on your lawn furniture is. Without that, I would just have no way of knowing it's actually snowing.
And if you can't see the furniture at all, it's a good snowstorm.
That's a great snowstorm. Yeah, if you just really can't tell that that's a table and 4 metal chairs, then that is a solid snowstorm right there.
Exactly. Just a lump of don't run into that when you're
Right.
sledding.
So what are we gonna talk about next week, Chris? Do you want to tease that? I think we're gonna have a guest next week, aren't we?
Yes. So next week is episode 65. And if you have not heard of him, Nathan Dickinson, he is going to come on and he tell us all about trees and homesteading and all kinds of stuff. I'm super excited for next week's episode, and it's going to be so much fun. Be sure to join us for that. And if you haven't already, be sure that you pick up your limited edition t-shirt from stakeholderprepping.store. We also have hoodies on there. We are talking about winter, so you can stay warm, but definitely join us next week. Until then, remember you are your own stakeholder, and we will see you then.